Hi, I'm Isiah McKimmie. I'm a couples therapist and sexologist, and I'm really excited to be talking to Dave Sheehan on Connect about how relationships impact health and how we can set really healthy boundaries with clients while also contributing to their well-being.
Hi everyone, this is Dave Sheehan from the Connect Show. I'm extremely excited to have Isiah McKimmie with me today, sexologist and relationships therapist. So,
Mm.
welcome.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Now, my first introduction to you was actually via the association webinars. There were three that you put together, which
Mm.
were watched by many members, by the way. They were really successful in terms of turnout for the number of people that actually came and had a look at those. So let's just talk. We'll just start straight off the bat as far as your background and why I think the association wanted to bring you in to do those webinars.
Mm. So really, my role is helping both individuals and couples with their challenges around relationships and sexuality. I am a relational psychotherapist, is one of my foundational qualifications. I also have a master's in sexual health, and I've been training other therapists, but also more broadly, other healthcare practitioners on how to support their clients around the really important but really delicate topics of relationships and sexuality, because we do know that relationships and sexuality they impact all of us. They are so crucial to our health, and they're topics that so many of us just weren't taught about and don't have the skills to deal with really well, both as, as someone experiencing that, but also as professionals supporting them.
Absolutely. And I think, well, we had a little chat before we came on air today. We wanted to, because I mean, there are so many things that we could talk about during this Connect show, but a couple that stood out for me, and I mentioned this to A, being male, that whole
Mm,
practitioner patient relationship, how
yeah,
important it was to actually have that discussed as well.
yeah, yeah.
That was one thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So did you want to sort of unpack that a bit?
Yeah, and I just really want to acknowledge you, Dave, and say how much I appreciate your awareness around that,
Yeah.
because these kinds of issues and dynamics, male practitioner, especially often with a female client, but also sometimes with male clients, that has an impact, that has a role. And I think that is different often from the dynamics that we often see with a female practitioner and a male client. And for me, when I hear you mention that, it creates a sense of safety and well-being within myself that you would be considering that as a practitioner and what your role might be. And I know that one of the things I talked about and I think it was the third webinar, was how many of us, men, women, our non-binary friends, have so unfortunately experienced unwanted touch at various times throughout their life. And I spoke about the impacts that that can have on people, and obviously then the potential for those difficult and traumatizing feelings to be triggered
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
situation where someone is touching
I
them.
was astounded watching the webinar that there was a stat that you quoted from Canada, I think, about how
Mm,
high the rate was where that
so
has actually occurred. It was up around
yeah,
50% or something. It
yeah.
was incredible, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And sadly, we know that for individuals who have experienced traumatic events and boundary
Mm.
violations like this, they are more likely to experience both physical and mental health impacts throughout their life. So, unfortunately, it also means that they're going to be more likely to be seeking some kind of care and support for these ongoing health implications that they'll have.
Yeah, absolutely. And in respect to, I mean, can you offer some advice
Mm.
to a practitioner, just basically run through a scenario where there might be an issue around that boundary, if you like?
Yeah. So and because you're the example in front of me, Dave. So let's kind of talk through an issue that could arise for someone. And I also think it is really important to say that often these issues are hidden under the surface. And I know I talk about this in more detail in the webinar. They're under the surface. Sometimes we can't know that they're there as practitioners. I often don't, even as a counselor, until I've really developed safety and trust and have been talking, in more depth with a client. But sometimes the clients themselves don't realize that something is there and might still be an issue for them. And sometimes it might not be until a kind of touch reminds their subconscious of an experience that they had, or
Mm,
sometimes even that there's a particular person reminds them of something. I've seen this play out in relationships where things have been really good in a relationship, and then a client's partner gets to the age that the person who touched them without consent was. And
mm,
so all of a sudden, there can be a trigger around that because of the reminder. And so for someone like you to hold in mind that unconsciously you could be triggering memories of really, really unsafe situations for someone that might not have come up. You might have been doing work with this person for a period of time, and then suddenly you stand in a particular way, you say something in particular, or there's just a certain kind of touch that then triggers this
mm,
feeling of a lack of safety. And then someone is very likely to go into a kind of a fight or flight, or even a kind of a frozen or dissociated state as some of those memories come rushing back, as the body doesn't know how to process everything that has been going on for
absolutely,
them.
yeah.
Mm.
It's great that you've touched on that, and it's taken, a couple of minutes of our time in the interview, but it's really important. And you really did unpack it very well in the full webinar. So for those that haven't seen Isaiah's webinars, I really highly recommend that if you get a chance for the recordings to check them out. Hey, the other point that we did want to excuse me, touch on was about um, knowing your place, the practitioner knowing their place
Mm.
in terms of scope of practice and
Yeah,
referring on. So that was
yeah.
just something else that I did want to bring up with you in the interview. So could you
Mm.
just sort of touch on that topic a little?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because I can imagine that for a lot of practitioners, as they are working on clients and creating safety and and having chit chat and helping clients release emotions and things from their body, that often even unwillingly they're going to hear a lot of what is going on in their clients' lives, that clients will share a lot that hasn't necessarily been invited, and that can
Mm,
be a really tricky place, I imagine, for practitioners to know someone is sharing something. I want to support. I think I've got good advice. They've opened up to me, and so then there's a dilemma of how much do I share, and how do I not kind of be rude to this person as well. And I think that is a
it
tricky
is, yeah.
line.
Little tightrope that you've got to sort of walk to be engaged, but not overstepping your mark as a practitioner in manual therapy, because
Mm.
we're not, or most of us are not qualified psychologists, for instance, so we can't really start unpacking issues, and that's why that referrals situation is so important, right?
Yeah, yeah. Look, and there's so much to be said for validating someone's experience, and and we covered this off. I've been a lecturer in therapy and a trainer in therapy for quite a long time, and this is something that we're constantly kind of saying to our counseling students is hold back on giving that advice. Hold back, even if you think you've got it, hold back on telling someone what you think they should do, because we really don't necessarily have the full picture of what's going on. And we also don't want to be creating a dynamic where someone is not being able to tune in to what they need themselves. So there is so much to be said for validating and saying that feels really hard and that feels really tricky. And if you get the sense, I suppose, that someone is bringing a similar issue, if they keep talking about their
Mm,
relationship, their partner, or something that they're really unhappy around, if something shows up repetitively, or you feel like they're talking about something that actually does kind of warrant someone who really knows what they're doing, I think in those cases, kind of gently letting someone know that this sounds really tricky, and you're not an expert in this, but you do know of people that are
mm.
really trained in this. And so opening up that door and saying, you know what, it's really normal. This sounds really hard. It's really normal to struggle with things like this. Have you thought of going to see someone who specializes in this? I've got a couple of people that I can recommend, and that can really take away any kind of shaming. Sometimes, when we overshare, then we can feel like a bit vulnerable, and it's like, oh God, did I make the practitioner uncomfortable? Did they
Absolutely.
not
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
hear
yeah.
me? So we don't want to do that. We also don't want to kind of, give the idea that like, well, you're a real problem here. Like you're a bit broken. You need to go and talk to someone. But we also do want to normalize that it's okay to get help, and it's actually really useful to speak to experts around this. And then by saying, we know a couple of people, we can make that transition much easier and smoother for
So
them
as
as well.
being a great practitioner means, as you're saying, is to have maybe that network of people that you can refer out to, and you're not
Yeah.
you're not formally triaging, but you
Yep.
are offering some recommendations that maybe what they're talking about might be best suited to this type of a therapist or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, right?
Absolutely, because I think, that's really the case for, healthcare practitioners across the board, isn't it? I certainly know that there might be things that someone is talking about that, okay, that might be a hormone issue, that might be a diet issue, that's probably something physical. And so in my network, I know the pelvic floor physios that I want to
Mm,
recommend, the naturopaths, the dietitians, the doctors, the gynecologists that are going to support people. So I think for all of us, it's really important to have those safe people that we can refer to.
absolutely. Azara, it's a short and sweet show. I'd love to continue chatting more about the many topics that you covered over those three webinars. And no doubt the association will get you back to do some more work on that and maybe some articles. But it's been really great chatting to you and just hopefully introducing you to more of our members via the Connect show as well. So thanks so much for sharing some time with us today. And hopefully we'll get you back on the show.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
Okay, thanks. See you, everyone.
Great.